school, and it turns out that they could actually have been registered under my name the entire time, and right now that's what they're doing. They're studying in school under her name.
Cuando yo estuve en la primera carpa que estuve viviendo, vinieron personas como organizaciones en llevarnos a otro refugio.
And when I was living in the first tent that I ever had, people came and tried again to take us back to a shelter.
Nos tuvieron ahí durante 3 días con el mismo régimen que nos recibió el primer refugio.
And they left us there only for 3 days, and it was the exact same process that they had done earlier.
A los 3 días nos tocó salir de ahí porque se cerraba ese refugio y yo estuve en la calle con los niños.
After 3 days, I had to leave because they closed the refuge and they kicked us out, and once again, I was in the street with my 5 kids.
Por mi propia cuenta busqué un refugio en la cual actualmente le dicen que es una cancha que reciben a familias. Yo fui con mis hijos de noche y en la cual me cerraron la puerta porque me dijeron que
Recent migrants, but when I got there, they told me I couldn't get in, that I had to come in and be represented by an organization, that I couldn't come in on my own.
Y lo que yo hice porque estaba nevando fue pedir a las personas dinero para yo poder pagar un hotel por un día hasta que acabe lo que estaba nevando con mis niños.
So the only thing I could do was ask them for money so that I could get a hotel room for just one night so that my kids would not be out in the snow.
Y cada vez que nos llevan a un refugio nos mienten porque nos piden datos míos y de mis hijos, supuestamente que nos van a ayudar con un hospedaje por un mes, por 15 días, o que nos van a ayudar con un departamento cuando no es así.
And every time they take us to a shelter, they lie and they lie again to us. They tell us that they're going to help us out for 15 days, for a month, but it's not the case every time.
Y eso es, para nosotros es una mentira, porque actualmente nosotros nos enteramos que con nuestros nombres de nosotros y de nuestros hijos están haciendo un fraude y en la cual no nos dan ni una ayuda a nosotros, porque nos dan un refugio por 3 días, por 10 días y luego nos dejan a la calle, nunca nos contestan el teléfono.
And to us, it all ends up being a lie. We actually realize that they're using our names and our children's names to commit fraud. They will take the funds in our name, and then within 5 days, within 10 days, they kick us out to the street again, and then nobody picks up on our phone calls. We're not able to get back into any shelters.
Y lo que actualmente yo como madre de familia lo que pido es que si nos pueden dar un espacio donde que nosotros podamos vivir como actualmente estamos viviendo, con buena alimentación. Nosotros por nuestra cuenta cuidamos a nuestros hijos de estar bien abrigados, pero la alimentación se los damos nosotros por nuestra cuenta, no pedimos nosotros eso, simplemente que nos dejen como madre de familia y
Está bien, está haciendo bien. Tú eres fuerte, tienes 5 hijos, eres fuerte. Tienes que ser fuerte para ellos. All I'm asking for as a mother is that they give us a place with peace and quiet so that I can take care of my children, so that we can feed them healthy foods, so that we can help them grow. All I want is a place that I can take care of my own kids. I don't need anybody else.
Que nos dejen trabajar, que nos ayuden con tener un permiso de trabajo, una carta de trabajo para nosotros poder arrendar nuestro departamento, poder tener una vivienda y poderle dar una educación y un buen futuro a nuestros hijos.
And all I ask is that they give us the opportunity to work, some papers to work, or something so that we can earn a living for ourselves, so that we can continue to take care of our kids, so that we can send them to school, so that we can provide them with a better future.
No pedimos nada regalado ni nada gratis, porque nosotros emigramos a este país porque sabíamos que teníamos que trabajar y sabemos trabajar. Y yo tengo una profesión que vine desde mi país, que ejercí y en la cual yo puedo trabajar, pero si no nos dan la oportunidad como país, como presidentes, como alcaldes de cada estado, no nos dan la oportunidad de nosotros demostrar lo que estamos hechos, entonces
Realistically, all we're asking for is that they let us work, that they let us create a life. When we migrated to the United States, we didn't come here for a handout. We didn't come here for presents. We knew that we were coming here to work. In my own country, I used to work. In my own country, I have a profession, but I have not been able to work here in the United States because of starting from all the way up to the president, our governors, our senators, they're all preventing us from being able to have a life.
Yo desde que llegué a este país llevo un grillete en la mano, por la cual yo no puedo movilizarme, no puedo trabajar, pero a pesar de eso veo la forma de poder salir adelante junto a mis hijos y no pedir nada a los demás. Pero a pesar de eso, yo como inmigrante, como extranjera, llevo el grillete, me reporto todos los días. Yo he escuchado que han venido aquí al campamento a decir que acá hay delincuentes. No somos delincuentes, somos inmigrantes que buscamos un futuro mejor para nuestra familia.
When I migrated to the U.S., I came to the community, and they speak ill about the camp. They say here there's criminals, here there's delinquents, but there's no criminals or delinquents here. There's just migrants who are trying to work, who are trying to have a life.
Y desde que estamos aquí, desde estas 2 últimas semanas han venido como que a intimidarnos, a decirnos que tenemos que salir de acá, a venir organizaciones de diferentes lugares y personas al decirnos que tenemos que ir obligatoriamente a un refugio con nuestras familias.
Especially in the past 2 weeks, it's gotten very difficult because multiple different organizations that we have to go to a shelter or we have to go somewhere else, and it's been hard on us and on our families.
Pero, ¿qué piensan ustedes como ciudadanos que una madre de familia va a permitir estar en un refugio con una mala alimentación para los niños, que hay comidas que les dan y los niños no comen, desnutridos, y cuando uno consigue la comida por su propia cuenta no te lo dejan entrar, simplemente lo botan?
So what do you guys think a mother like myself is going to do if you put me in a shelter where there's no care for my kids, there's not sufficiently nutritious foods that the kids honestly don't eat, and then if I go and I try and buy food on my own, they won't even let me bring it into the shelter?
Entonces, eso es la razón por la cual yo como madre de familia decidí acampar en este sitio y con muchas familias más, porque somos muchas familias. A pesar de, no importa la condición que estamos viviendo, mis hijos están en una escuela, están con una buena alimentación, un buen cuidado.
And this is why myself as a mother, I made the decision to come here, to live here, because while we live, I was able to register them in school nearby.
Entonces, que nos puedan ayudar eso, en tener un espacio o ayudarnos a hacer los papeles, en poder tener un permiso de trabajo y una carta de trabajo para cual nosotros poder alquilar una vivienda y poder empezar a trabajar.
And so this is why what I'm asking from our mayor, from our governor, from our senators is so that we can rent a home.
When you arrived in Denver, and also how far do you feel you are from being able to access your own place right now?
Bueno, ¿te lo puedes decir hace cuánto usted vino a Denver y de qué lejos usted se siente de que tú podrías alquilar tu propio apartamento o tu propio sitio, casa?
Yo llegué el 20 de diciembre a Denver. Desde que llegué estuve en un refugio durante 2 meses, en la cual no pude salir, nos dieron un régimen. De ahí llegaba una organización en la cual nos sacó a otro refugio por días. Nos tenían 3 días, nos dejaban en la calle. Nos veníamos en la carpa, venía otra organización, nos sacaba porque éramos familia, nos llevaba 3 días y así. Siempre nos pedían los datos y los nombres. Y si no mal recuerdo, en 3 organizaciones he postulado para un departamento, yo explicando mi caso y diciendo que tengo niños menores de edad, que tengo el grillete en la mano. Ellos me decían, sí, dame tus datos, dame todo tu número de A, la cual uno entra con migración, en la cual te vamos a ayudar. Y hasta el día de hoy nunca me llamaron.
¿Y usted se siente que está cerca de poder tener como que su propio casa, su propio apartamento, o todavía se siente?
Bueno, sí, yo creo que aquí en Denver uno, si no tiene una carta de trabajo, no puede alquilar porque no te alquila un departamento.
I feel like I'm pretty far because here in Denver, if you don't have a work permit, if you don't have a job, nobody will even rent you an apartment to begin with.
Y con una carta de trabajo yo sí me siento capaz de poder pagar y solventar como actualmente estoy haciendo a mi familia.
And with a work permit, I would be able to work and pay for things and take care of my family, like I've been doing out here.
The other thing I wonder is when we talk about renting in Denver, everyone, no matter where they're from, talks about how expensive it is to live here. Do you think if you had a job, you'd be able to make it work here, or would you think about going somewhere else?
Bueno, la otra pregunta que tengo es que todo el mundo, no importa si son migrantes o no, en la ciudad de Denver están quejando mucho de que alquilar está bien caro. Yo quería saber si usted tenía como que permiso de trabajar, ¿usted quería quedarte aquí o que te va para otra ciudad?
A los refugios pedí información y me dijeron que me iban a ayudar con el tema del grillete. Como bien saben, cuando uno lleva un grillete en la mano, uno no se puede movilizar de estado como uno quisiera.
So when I was at the shelter, I actually asked for that information. She has she has like a locator on.
Got it.
Yeah.
From CB, from
Yeah.
Border Patrol.
Yeah, from Border Patrol on her hand, and they told her that they were going to help her figure it out, so that if she wanted to leave or go somewhere else, but realistically nobody has helped. She's multiple times, and she has not even. As you guys know, you can't move without with the CBP locator on. You can't leave the city. You can't leave the state.
When you started your journey from Peru, what did you believe you would find here? What were you told would be here for you?
Cuando usted empezó tu viaje desde Perú, ¿qué te habían dicho sobre que iba a encontrar aquí en los Estados Unidos? ¿O que usted esperaba encontrar aquí?
Bueno, como en los demás países latinos, ¿no? Como cualquier inmigrante llega y es libre de poder alquilar una casa, una vivienda, es libre de que los niños tengan una educación, sean de qué país sean. Pensé que las cosas eran así y es libre de buscar la oportunidad de tener un trabajo.
I thought it would be like any other, Latin American country where somebody is able to come and, find a house for themselves and for their family. They can rent an apartment, that they can, get an education for their kids, that, they'd be able to work to support their family, support their life.
Thank you.
¿Otra pregunta? No.
Muchas gracias.
A la orden siempre.
Well, Javier, maybe you could speak to the nexus of...
I'm going to speak at closer towards the end. I want to try and focus right now on the other. Mira, ¿quién más hay para hablar? ¿Quién más para hablar? ¿Tú vas a hablar? Mira, recuerda con calma conmigo. No sé si este cuento en inglés, español. Apunta, David. Mira, D-A-V-I-D. Ok, para no...
Eso es.
Okay. Bueno, dile su nombre.
Mi nombre es David.
My name is David. D-A-V-I-D.
Eso.
Un poquito más cerca.
Sí.
David Serpa. Z-E-R-P-A.
Serpa. Z-E-R-P-A.
Ya.
Where are you from?
¿De dónde tú eres?
Venezuela.
Venezuela.
Buenas tardes.
Good afternoon.
Yo quiero compartir un poco de la historia de lo que vivimos aquí en este lugar.
I want to share a little bit about the history of what we've lived here in this area.
Yo soy de Venezuela. Vengo perseguido también por el mandato de Maduro.
I'm from Venezuela. I was persecuted too. I came here as due to the persecution. We're actually killed by Maduro's government.
Y bueno, fui perseguido también con mi familia.
And I was persecuted as well with my family.
Y recorrimos el mundo, cada quien en Ecuador, Colombia, y yo decidí subir hacia otro camino mejor.
And we escaped everywhere. ¿Dónde me dijiste? Ecuador.
Colombia.
Is a brother in Ecuador, in Colombia, and
ya
I came here seeking a brighter future.
Por una nueva estabilidad para la familia y un nuevo comienzo para la familia.
Hopefully, new stability and a new start for my family.
Pero llegando aquí a Denver, me recibieron un refugio y como a los 3 días me buscaron la vuelta para sacarme y en pleno invierno me sacaron para afuera.
But when I got here to Denver, I stayed in a shelter for 3 days, and they looked for some reason to kick me out after the 3 days, and they kicked me out in the middle of winter.
Y es por eso que me encuentro en este campamento, gracias a Dios y bueno, y a los hermanos que están conmigo, Hemos sufrido y hemos llorado, pero no podemos rendirnos fácilmente.
But this is why I'm here in this camp, here with my brethren. We've cried, we've suffered together, but we can still smile.
Y bueno, necesitamos que nos ayuden, que se pongan la mano en el corazón y vivan lo que nosotros vivimos a diario.
But we need people to help us. We need people to put their hand to their chest and come and experience what we've been experiencing every day.
Y queremos una respuesta, que nos ayuden a un nuevo comienzo. Nosotros no venimos a Estados Unidos a sufrir, venimos es a triunfar.
And we need some help to get started again. We didn't come to the United States to continue suffering. We came because we want to triumph. We want to succeed.
Y necesitamos el apoyo de las personas que realmente tengan la capacidad de ayudarnos.
And we need the help of the people who realistically have the capacity to help us.
Y bueno, que Dios los bendiga y que tengan feliz tarde.
And that, may God bless you all, and I hope you guys have a good afternoon.
Gracias.
Un momento. Questions?
Can I ask you the same question? How close or far does being able to have your own place and take care of yourself feel for you right now?
¿Qué cerca o lejos tú te sientes la meta de que tú puedes tener tu propio lugar y cuidarte tú solo?
Bueno, la única meta que yo necesito es el permiso de trabajo.
Well, the only thing I actually need is permission to work.
Y en lo demás yo lo hago.
And the rest, I'll take care of it.
Claro. Gracias.
Muchas gracias. ¿Cuántos años tienes?
31.
Gracias. Mucho gusto.
Gracias.
Mohan, can you address the support you're getting from the protesters down there?
We have a structure, B. I will speak to it, or I promise you someone else will. Who's next up?
I'm next, and there's going to be...
Cool. No worries.
Hi, I'm V Reeves with HAND, Housekeys Action Network Denver. I use they, them pronouns. My name is spelled V, just the letter V, last name Reeves. So we called for this emergency press conference because it became very clear from several meetings that we'd been having with the folks here at this encampment and also with other migrants that there needed to be clarification on the kinds of systemic conditions these folks are put under. There's a lot of dissonance and a huge amount of difference between what is coming out of the city and what the mayor is saying and what the reality of these people's lives are. There's also so many incredibly strong parallels that come between the cause for the unhoused migrants' rights here in Colorado and in the U.S., and then there are parallels with the fight for a free Palestine. Now, a lot of that comes from the fact that we're facing a common enemy. We're facing a colonial structure that decides that black and brown bodies are not of the same value as white European colonial settler bodies are. And we're living in a structure that decides that it's going to accept children torn and hanging from beams and young children suffering from malnourishment on the side of the road and in tents because of where they're coming from. And it's a cruel twist of fate that these innocent lives find themselves in this position when all they want and all they've been asking for and fighting for all this time is the ability to exist, to live a life, to thrive, to make their own way, to have opportunities. And that is something that is reiterated so strongly in this community. We've had a lot of help from the community recently, a lot of mutual aid support that's come from the pro-Palestine groups, from the students organizing the protest. And I know that the students out there organizing, not just here in Colorado, but across the nation, are feeling a lot of that trepidation and fear. They're feeling that constant threat of police violence. They're fearing the state-sanctioned violence that many of them perhaps have never felt before. And this is something that is such supposedly normalized reality for our migrants here locally and also for Palestinians, right? The fear of going outside, the fear of authority, and of how and what's going to happen. Recently received a notice that they're going to be closing this camp on May 8th, on Wednesday. They have still had police show up in force, multiple cars, to harass people. Many of these times they didn't even have a representative that spoke any Spanish. So it's pure intimidation tactics. There's no real rhyme or reason behind it. And this is something that we've seen under this new administration becoming more and more the case. So now that the mayor is claiming that these hotels, which by the way, the city had already purchased before he ever got into office, there were already plans for these hotels to come through, but he's taken full credit and co-opted the idea of housing unhoused people in hotels. Before his program, at least we had a mayor who was being very clear about his thoughts and feelings towards the people that he was oppressing. To go into these special programs and to receive some kind of help, limited help, and actually we're seeing a lot of that help's going to be temporary and run out in a matter of time. You have folks here in this encampment who received 3 months of rental assistance, sustained rental support, things that these people need when they don't have the legal opportunity to do them themselves. You've heard clearly from Mandy who spoke. She said, we're not looking for a handout. We come here because we're looking for opportunity. And so I think what we're doing here today is to make sure that we're not forgetting the voices of the people in this community, that we're hearing them loud and clear, and that we're hearing their reality and understanding it as truth, even when othering the situation. We see that in Palestine, we see that with Israel. We see, you can have all the evidence in the world of these atrocities, of this genocide, and you can still have governments suggesting, that it's not happening. And so what's so important is we have to remain vigilant on not allowing government entities, whether it's locally here and called again because of the short time frame of the fact that this camp is going to be closed on Wednesday. This is something that's going to launch a lot of them into further instability, a further lack of security, when again all they're asking for is the opportunity to have some stability for their families, to be able to figure things out for themselves. You heard from the last speaker, he said, just give us the right to work and we'll be able to do the rest. And so I think, we need to be incredibly aware of that. And as was said also in the very beginning by Willie, or that the migrants are taking all of this funding and it's not going to our parks and recreation, our flower beds outside of the Capitol. The reality is that a lot of funding, as we know, is going to support these systemic institutions that are continuing to oppress and perpetuate success only for a select few, for the rich. We know that a lot of this funding isn't going directly to people and that it isn't enough. And that we need to be asking, how can we make sure that we are divesting from problematic systems, that we are pulling away from putting all that funding into things like genocide in a whole other country and oppressing further people, and how can we look to support the people who came here, who are here, and are actively seeking to integrate and be part of our community and to stay. Something that I've heard so many migrants say, despite the idea that the mayor's putting forward, is that they came to Denver and they like it here. They want to be here. So whenever we hear these narratives that this is just another stop in the road, that's not the case. Denver has already become a sense of home for so many, and we have to protect that sense of home in the same way we're protecting the sense of home for the Palestinians who are also going through their displacement. This is a home that belongs to these people. They are here right now, they're in our community, and we need to be fighting for them to stay. And that looks like a lot of things. It looks like expanding programs. It looks like accountability of the programs that exist. We've heard about the shelter horror stories, people getting kicked out with their children in the middle of the night. We've heard about malnutrition. There are children who have rib bones showing here in Denver because they're not receiving the right food. I get sent photos all the time of things like a breakfast that includes a hard-boiled egg that still has ice all over it. and a microwavable sausage patty and claiming that somehow that's going to feed these children. So we're so grateful to a community that decided that we're not going to stand for the oppression of the most vulnerable, that we're going to come together and we're going to support. So Housekeys Action Network Denver is so excited to be working with these groups that are very actively supporting the student protest groups, Students for a Democratic Society, Colorado Palestine Coalition. We're excited at any opportunity to continue lived experience. They know what needs to be done. We don't need to refer to anybody else to decide what they need or how they need it, because they're already aware of the obstacles and they have that experience. So it's about time that we decide we're going to be listening to that and taking direction from that. Yes.
Given that the mayor doesn't have control over employment law, and that there's a lot of skepticism about what the city can deliver as far as shelters and services, like, what do you want to see? Like, would you want to see the asylum program that is operating now open to anyone, or just like let us camp here forever? Like, what's the answer here?
Right, so there's a few options. So first of all, I will talk about the asylum program, because the reality of the people on the ground is not the reality of what's been pitched. It was pitched as a 6-month program for around 1,000 people that would involve employment and housing support in that time, work training, all of that. We have seen screenshots and messages directly from workers from these service providers that are asking for requirements such as having an employment verification letter of stable income and a stable job, salaried position, something like that, and a lease signed by everybody in the family
To get into the
and
asylum
ID
program?
cards to get into the asylum program, which makes zero sense. And we had meetings internally with people who were supposedly part of this program, like the director of economic development and growth, and he said he was part of the workforce program. He said absolutely not, we shouldn't be requiring ID cards or employment verification, but the reason is because the funding that is tied to the housing support is tied to state funding, which requires employment verification letters. So in order to get that initial rental assistance, and they only have enough funding for 1 or 2 months. So how can you be so bold and unabashed and, shameless to think that you can speak to the public and tell them that a 6-month program exists when you don't have the funding to cover 6 months?
So again, if you're skeptical of their ability to deliver anything, what do you want to see happen?
I think that it's very clear that this whole thing was a sham to suggest that they're offering any kind of real substantial support to migrants. It's just not the case. So I think if you're going to be honest with the people, you need to be honest about the fact that the support and assistance you're suggesting is there for migrants that you're suggesting are welcome is fundamentally not, and is not going to be readily available for people, and people are going to have to lie to get into the program or find other ways around it to receive any kind of support, or the people who do receive the support don't actually need it because they already have met those requirements. So the concern is, even though the program before was not perfect, we had a chance as community members, as resource organizations, to come in with around a month time and kind of do some triaging of the situation. We had enough time, to talk with folks and understand what it would be, what their options were. Now, because that select program, which 1,000 people, they said it was then 800 people, they then said it was around 175 families, is a drop in the bucket. Everybody else was supposed to get 3 days of shelter. 3 days of shelter are virtually non-existent. We have multiple accounts and interviews with people who are saying that unless they know somebody exists for them. And so we need to demand that there's real assistance and support for people, including continuous immigration document support. We need those clinics to continue. We don't need to close the door on people who have CBP-1 or TPS just because we're deciding to focus on asylum seekers. We don't need to do that. There are people who perfectly qualify for that and could get access to their work permits faster if we continue to process those applications. So I would say emphasis on the fact that people do need that continued legal clinic support to process their papers. They're so eager and determined to find a legal way to do this. We need to offer that assistance. And there are ways, yes, it would take time, but it would allow us, it would actually be helping these people get on the path instead of outright denying them even that kind of documentation support when they're in supposed shelter, and knowing that you're basically turning your backs on these people and without any kind of, real institutional support with that, they're going to be left continuing facing this sort of reality. And they don't want to be. So I would say first and foremost that, and then folks who are in shelter right now have a lot of issues with the conditions. We need accountability. The mayor and some of the city council people have expressed interest in increasing shelter accountability. We need that for migrant shelters as well, because we've heard of all kinds of mistreatments. We have an audio recording of a shelter staff member, a shelter worker, telling people that they were going to close the bathrooms for a day to collectively punish them because they weren't tidy enough. And so nobody was allowed to shower in the shelter because a worker decided that that was a punishment that everybody was going to get. So things like that are happening. Legal document support, conditions inside, shelter accountability. And then let's talk with the people who are on the grounds and triaging this and the resources that are available, because the way that the mayor rolled out this plan was incredibly secretive. It was with a small circle of people, and even people in his small circle don't understand other elements of the program, don't understand what other people are doing. And so there's so much confusion internally because he's not choosing to be transparent and he's not engaging community. So if he were to decide to engage community on things like housing, safety, migrant support, you would have a completely different result, and you would be able to strategize and understand, if there were lapses in government support, where the community can provide that. We're willing to. There are so many partners who are willing to support migrants, so many people who are willing to open their doors and figure out how to do it and make it work, and just need to know how. And so I think creating more of a community team around it that first and foremost has the migrants leading that discussion, not other people who, again, come in and believe they know what's best or feel like they can control the migrant narrative when they're not, going through it themselves. So we need a lot of just kind of he needs to shift his whole approach to things, because the way he's doing it right now is failing miserably, and a lot of these people are going to end up arrested and deported. He's filling his jails, and it feels as though he's prioritizing things like the police, heavily increasing the police budget, and also things like $2 million on pickleball, which would, cover all available hygiene resources for every unhoused person publicly in Denver. So certain things like that need to be, relooked at. And again, we heard today some of the migrants talking about how they're being used as an excuse. His misuse of funds and the misuse of funds of these other organizations is being pinned on the migrants themselves and on the crisis. And we're not looking to just decide to kick everybody out. If the mayor had his way, and this plan was the model for all of the other cities across the U.S., after 3 days, anybody, it would be practically illegal for them to exist in any space for more than 72 hours. Because at that point, they're subject to arrest or deportation if they don't leave with a bus ticket, if they can't afford to pay for a hotel, which we heard is incredibly difficult and expensive, especially for a family of 7, 2 parents and 5 kids, or they can't afford to pay rent, or they can't find a job in 3 days. It would make it a living hell when it already is incredibly difficult for these folks to begin with. So I hope that nobody takes the mayor's guidance on that and decides to have the same kind of migrant plan in their cities, and we need to rapidly fix ours with the community voice at the center of it.
You touched on something a couple minutes ago. Do you believe you may have the support of just purely the private sector to keep the government out of this?
I think it has to. I think there's duality to it. I think it's not one-sided. I think that community does show up and defend other community members when the government isn't able to do so. So what people don't understand when they look at an encampment, they don't see the synchronicity of it. They don't understand that it's, community childcare being provided. They don't understand that, it's support. If somebody has a car, they can go and actually bring back medication or food to be able to help care for the children or individuals here. So in the same way, on a broader spectrum, this is like a microcosm of what the community can do But of course, when we're already struggling to pay rent because it's so unaffordable at an average of $1,800 a month for a one bedroom, the average person feels as though they're struggling to stay afloat. And we've committed ourselves to this idea of rugged individualism as an American value when really it's hurting us more than it's helping us. So I think it forces our dependence in a lot of ways on the government for some helps and for some assistance. And also when they are in elected positions, when they have access to all these funds, it's just pure irresponsible with how they're doing it and using it. It's just not paying attention to the voice of the people. And so I think people will do what they need to do when the government's not there.
Last question, your royalty for a day. What would you have done?
I would never be royalty, first of all.
You're in charge for a day.
I'm not, okay. I think that, again, what I would hope to hear from other advocates and organizers is that we are following the lead of the people in need. This is what I hope we're going to be hearing, and I believe we are going to be hearing from the student protesters. They're following the lead of the Palestinians who have asked for support. And so in the same way, we need to follow the lead of the most vulnerable and marginalized people in our community. So I followed the lead by being part of organizing this event today to be able to get their voices out there and have the understanding that their reality is so greatly different from the narrative that's being pushed by the city. And so I think...
Let me stop you just... And physically, these people, the situation here, would you want everybody in a single-family home, in a neighborhood? Does this work?
So we have actually, Hand has done some research into this, has done some surveying. We've had some community dialogue with the migrant unhoused group and also other unhoused demographic populations. Publishing a report in a little bit that kind of details the sort of housing that the community is looking for. Migrants specifically, yes, a lot of them, are saying that if they had a single family home, they're asking for the most basic of things. There are some people who say they have a family of 6, of 8, and they would like to live together. And given the current system, a lot of families are being separated rather than given the opportunity to house together. And so, while joint housing is an option for some, other people feel it's not an option. So I would say that it kind of, at this point, they need to have a choice. And they're nowhere close to having any kind of choice as to the kind of housing that they like, but something where they'd be able to maintain after rental assistance or support, right? So that's another issue. What I would do differently is I wouldn't be so short-sighted and so focused on optics and on my campaigning, even though I'm already in office, that I would continue to offer short-term rental assistance that's going to time out for migrants 6 months, which again, it's right now only 1 or 2 months max because of the funds that they have available, or 6 months, or even a year or 2 years. Because what we're going to see is all these people are going to be coming back in force on the streets because the rent is only getting higher, more than $18 a month, and there's no way to sustain that. You need to start creating housing systems, like a social housing system, that recognizes that there are poor people, there are also average everyday people who are not going to be able to pay the astronomical prices for housing. Housing has now become a commodity for the rich to trade rather than a necessary shelter to survive. So as soon as we start seeing housing as truly a need and a necessary thing, we need to then think of systems that can migrant children potentially dying. That was one of the biggest preoccupations our advocates had this past winter was, I hope I don't find one day a tent with a family and a small child in that kind of situation. So it's that dire, it's that critical, and we need to be starting now to create those sustainable systems that, would not result in people losing rental assistance and all of a sudden ending up back where they started.
My last question after. Okay, sorry. My last question, because people are going to see you have unprotected access to a railroad track. There's kids running around here. You have prairie dogs in the trash. Kids, people are going to see that. What would you tell them when they see this on TV about what's going on here and why the city may use those reasons as a reason to move the camp out?
We have always advocated alongside migrants for there to be no children in tents. We don't believe it's a safe. They have access to food and other resources and warmth and community protection. what I see here, the alternative, right, is this isn't going to stop existing. It's actually going to be perpetuated because of the system we have in place, where they're timing out and they're telling, people, hoping that intimidation is going to scare them to the next city, and the next city is going to do the same. And so folks are wising up to that, and they're realizing I have really nowhere to go with my children that I can be safe, and they are continuously seeking and asking for support to do so. So this is not a choice. This is definitely a means of survival, and we cannot criminalize and punish the people for surviving when it's not their fault and this is not what they wanted for their children.
Great. Thank you.
One question I have is, if the sweep does happen on May 9th, what does that look like? Are people going to be forced into a shelter, or are people just going to have to set up a camp somewhere else? What's going to happen on May 9th if the sweep happens?
As of right now, we have had no solid confirmation that the city is going to be offering anything indoors. We have heard rumors that there's potential for them again to offer temporary stay of a month. And possible that if given the opportunity, some people would go inside, but before doing so, they are demanding, that there be a change to this brief length of stay, that there be accountability to how the workers treat them inside, that there is respect for them, that they be allowed to support themselves. Things like being able to have, we've had instances of baby formula being taken away from parents inside these shelters. Just things that are so egregious. And so, there needs to be a change in how they're treating the nutrition and the food, but also just the conditions of treatment inside these places. Overall, I would say they're seeking autonomy and self-determination. And so, will people go indoors? If the indoor option does not offer autonomy, self-determination, does not offer them security, stability, does not, for many of them, as we heard today, does not offer them actually a pathway to employment or housing, and risks them ending up back on the streets with fewer gear than they started because they had to get rid of all of it. And now with fewer connections because they've been scattered and separated from their original community. What kind of a choice is that, right? And so I think before even considering that an option, it needs to seriously be reassessed and looked at, and these folks need to be heard. What are they going to do? It's not clear, but what is clear is that they're going to keep surviving, and they exist, and they're here. And that's so important, because this idea that the mayor was, pushing, that his program was not going to have people end up on the streets, it's having the exact opposite effect. And unfortunately, with his increased policing, I worry about arrests and deportations of parents without their children, separating families, and we've already heard cases of that as well. So they're going to keep surviving however they can. And a big ask for the community is actually to reach out if anybody does have, maybe a room to spare, wants to discuss what it's like to host a family, host an individual, wants to talk about opportunities like that to work with us. The question earlier was about if the community is able to take over, and we're in a situation where the community needs to for these people. So I really hope that they will consider reaching out to us, and we'll make those connections happen and make sure that we can do everything we can to support folks. Other questions? Okay. And with that, I would love to introduce Hannah from Colorado Palestine Coalition.
Do you need me to spell my name?
Yes, please.
Okay. Hana, last name Fageeeh.
Tiny step closer.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. My name's Hannah. I'm with the Colorado Palestine Coalition, and I've also worked with Housekeys Action Network Denver in the past. I've been working with the students at the Auraria Campus who have staged an encampment to demand divestment from colonial settler state of Israel. at the University of Colorado, Denver. Last week on Friday, our protesters were met with brutality and mass arrest for standing up for the people of Gaza who are experiencing a genocide funded by American tax dollars. I won't buy the lie that we can't house every unhoused person on the streets of Denver while we send millions of Colorado tax dollars to a Zionist colonial settler entity, and while we continue to build empty luxury apartments that can't house people because they can't afford them. This is the same American empire that continues to villainize, criminalize, and oppress the migrants that are seeking refuge here in Denver, Colorado. I'm here to show solidarity with the migrant community and speak on our government's complicity, more specifically to say shame on Mike Johnson, who has literally campaigned on the backs of unhoused people in the city of Denver, making empty promises of housing everyone, quote unquote. The only thing he's done for us is displace unhoused people, shut down life-saving services, and lie to the public about his commitment to show up for the unhoused community. All of us stand here today recognizing the overlap of the Palestinian movement and the unhoused cause of displacement. There are families here, there are children who go to school in this neighborhood. We stand here in commitment to continue to take care of one another, shelter one another, and love one another while our government, specifically the city and county of Denver, fails us. We will continue to demand that they hear us until there is liberation, housing, food, work permits, and safety for all of those seeking a right to life. If they sweep this camp, we will be around to support the next camp and the next encampment while we fight for an end to all sweeps and a right to housing for all those displaced due to American imperialism and colonial violence. Free Palestine and house all of our community now and end the camping ban now. Thank you. Do you guys have questions? Thank you.
Hello, my name is Gerald Mueller, Geralmueller.
And I am Paul Nelson, Paulnelson, and we are students from Democratic Society. And
I'm Truman Westberg, Trumanwestberg.
You guys kind of surround the mics?
Sure.
Yeah, thanks.
So we came out here today in part because we are having an encampment ourselves. We have an encampment on the Auraria Campus. It's an Auraria Campus encampment for Palestine, against the genocide, and for a free Palestine, for divestment. And we've received such tremendous support from our community that we've begun to build chains of support to give our extra food, clothing, the sort of things that our community are giving us to keep our encampment going. We are now moving to our neighbors here to ensure that none of it goes to waste, and that the people here have our mutual aid and that support. In addition to this, we are focusing on an end to U.S. wars and interventions. We understand that these things are interconnected. People don't normally flee their home countries. They do so after the U.S. engages in either economic war against their countries, real war against their countries, or occupies their countries or otherwise. And we've seen it happen again and again. In Denver SDS and in SDS across the country, we say end to all U.S. wars and interventions. They do no good. They produce this kind of crisis. And really, we say that the people of Palestine are themselves experiencing a crisis in which they're being driven from their homes. So these issues are immediately connected. And we say to them that all people deserve to be free. All people deserve to live in a home with their families, with food and water and everything on the land. But these things are taken from them by an oppressive and exploitative system that the United States government is funding and facilitating. The U.S. military arms and equips the IOF in its assault against the Palestinians, just as the U.S. sanctions against Venezuela really do harm the economic interests of their people and drive many of their people to the United States. And so we say on this issue, hands off Venezuela, U.S. hands off, let the people chart their own course. And we also say an end to all U.S. wars and intervention, an end to the genocide. It's that simple.
On behalf of Students for Democratic Society, I would also like to say that we want to have solidarity from our encampment to this one, and we ask that law enforcement stop harassing these people and let them stay in peace. And not only that, but to provide legalization for all, provide jobs, end unemployment in Colorado so that these people can work and make a living for themselves that is more dignified than the encampment that they've been forced into. And make these jobs so that there's no threats of deportation, no exploitation based on their status, and legalization for all would end that kind of predatory behavior in employment. It is very clear that the selling this promise of the American dream is not being followed through for people who come here who want a better and brighter future. These are empty promises, and the system has failed them. And Students for Democratic Society is saying for calling for legalization for all. I know that we have the resources to provide for these people because and provide a way for them to create their own livelihoods. Do the right thing and stop sending aid to Israel, and instead help your people here, citizens and migrants alike.
Yes, and to add to that, since the instantiation of the occupation, there have been more than $263 billion sent to Israel. $263 billion. Just imagine what could be done with that money. Just imagine. We could house everyone in the state of Colorado. We could give everyone a job. We could put everyone through school and no one would have any debt and we would still have money left over. This is why students stand against the genocide in Palestine. This is why students say end all U.S. aid to Israel and put that money back to the people. All power to the people. These people here are our neighbors. These people here work in Colorado. These people here pay taxes in Colorado and deserve to be citizens in Colorado. These are effectively citizens, but they are legally made non-citizens and held in a second-class citizenship. It is disgusting and it needs to stop. And I think we'll end by saying that we still haven't seen our demands met by our administrators. And so we're going to continue our encampment. And it's a safe encampment. There's been a lot of slander about the safety of our encampment. It's the safest place on campus. There's more medical attention there than students were able to receive while they were going on campus. And I'll tell you here, there's probably slander about the safety of this campus. These are families out here. I see it. They're just walking around. There's a baby in overalls playing. This is not an unsafe place. The only time encampments like these and encampments like those on Auraria become unsafe is when the Denver Police Department or other police departments are sent to them to sweep them clean. That's horrible. That is where the lack of safety comes from, is when the police are brought in.
And what are your demands for the Auraria Campus encampment?
Sure. So we have our list officially uploaded to sdsdenver.com, but I'll just say this. We want disclosure, all investments, disclosed from MSU and CU. We want divestment. We want divestment from the occupation. Any weapons corporations or any other corporations that operate within the occupation need to have their ties cut from the university. We want disclosure, divest, what do you think of
End study abroad.
Yes, we want an end to study abroad programs. And to the university saying that they don't have said programs, we would like you to commit to never having those programs, an indefinite termination of any study abroad programs to Israel. Such programs facilitate civil rights infringements on our own citizens here. When a Palestinian student goes on such a trip, they are subject to a military court system. They're subject to apartheid. And that is something facilitated by our universities when they allow these programs to take place. So we say no more to those. And we also want MSU to stop manufacturing parts for Lockheed Martin.
We also demand that both CU Denver and MSU release a statement condemning the genocidal actions of Israel.
And finally, we demand that all the charges be dropped on all those peaceful protesters last Friday, myself included, who were hauled off to jail for standing up for peace and justice. That includes the faculty. That includes more than the 3 faculty who were arrested in the course of this protest. MSU Denver should be ashamed of themselves that they allowed their faculty to be arrested in the course of a peaceful protest for the end of a genocide.
Are you going to move the encampment for this event scheduled for the quad?
The event scheduled for the quad?
Yeah, coming up around graduation. Not graduations themselves, but events around graduation.
Sorry, we have several events planned for the next couple days, so they may have to do a reschedule.
If they meet our demands, we will pack up our encampment, but until they can meet the demands and end their complicity in the genocide, our encampment is staying.
And the itinerary is full.
When is the graduation?
I believe the CU Denver graduation is May 10th. I'd also like to add one more thing. Being at our encampment, we have such a multicultural group. People from all backgrounds coming and sharing their food, their music, their art, their culture, and their revolutionary solidarity. And it is the most beautiful community you could see. By offering legalization for all, for the migrants staying at this encampment, we are inviting Colorado and the United States to another beautiful community and a sharing of culture and a sharing of solidarity.
We haven't had the violence here like around other similar encampments around the country. Why is that?
We have had violence at our encampment, and it's been at the hands of the police, just like the encampments around the country.
I understand it, but not necessarily the police, but people involved in violence. I mean, just general. We see buildings invaded and libraries torn apart and fires started. Why isn't that happening here?
So all that doesn't exist in the abstract, right? I would prefer to speak to concrete cases of that rather than talk about abstract violence, to be honest with you.
Well, what's different about Denver? How about that?
What do you mean what's different about Denver?
Why don't we see those kinds of events here in Denver?
What kind of events?
Violence.
Just violence in the abstract?
Taking over buildings.
Taking over, okay.
Like the library.
Columbia University.
Yeah.
Understandable. So maybe you could rephrase your question.
Why don't we see events happening around the country that are much worse? It's not a
Sorry.
It may be a compliment. Why don't we see that here?
Why don't we see that here?
Yeah.
We do see an action like that taking place in the Auraria Encampment for Palestine. This is one such encampment where students are holding a space on their campus against a campus administration that would rather have them removed, right? And so there is such a thing happening on this campus, and it's not violent by any means. It's advancing a cause. It's an act of civil disobedience against a campus policy that was erected to stop students from protesting the Iraq War. And so, nothing's violent about it. We're just doing civil disobedience like Martin Luther King taught us.
And if you believe that occupying a building is violence, why don't you believe that occupying Palestine is violence?
Do you have any demands for Hamas? You have all kinds of demands for Israel. How about demands for Hamas?
We're American citizens. We make demands of the American government.
Do you have any demands for Hamas? Or suggestions? Statements? Something? Okay. Great.
We have another speaker going to close. Time? Told you, I closed out. Hey everybody, like I said, my name is Mohammed. I am I'm a member of the Colorado Palestine Coalition, founding member of the Colorado chapter of Doctors Against Genocide. I'm a physician by trade, a pediatrician by practice. I got involved in this movement because I wanted to support these students and what they're doing. As a teacher myself, I feel like the best thing we can do is lead by example. So I showed up to the encampment, had the pleasure of seeing the amazing setup that they had down at CU on the Tivoli quad. And while I was there, I learned about the goodwill that they're trying to convey, not just in the Tivoli area, not just to, across the ocean to the people in Gaza, but they care intimately about the people around them. And so once I started learning that food donations were being done to migrant and homeless encampments in the area, I decided I wanted to try and help and get involved in that. That's how I ended up meeting V and the rest of the wonderful people here. I came out here with the expectation that as a physician coming to a place in an austere environment with limited resources, that I was going to see kids who were not well taken care of, kids who were dirty, kids who were sick, kids who were unwell, The only thing I see is kids who are loved deeply by their parents who are trying their hardest to take care of these kids. I had the chance to go by and examine every one of these kids. Like I said, the only thing I found was that sometimes their parents give them a little too much sweets, a little too much love, a little too much play. You'll see them running around here. Ultimately, I ask a question of you guys. The government is trying to move this encampment. I speak for the kids. I will tell you, in my experience, children who are moved, especially children who are unhoused, there are multiple studies on this topic. It shows that they have higher levels of anxiety, depression, stress. The big factor is there's a severe and rapid change in their social life. How about kids who've had to move 8 times? The people in this encampment, many of them have had to move 8 times so far. At the end of the day, this will ultimately affect these kids. We want these kids to have a chance and an opportunity here in the United States. We need to protect them. Who do we go to when the government is the one abusing these kids? The government is trying to clear this encampment by May 8th. The school year is not even done. These kids need a chance to at least finish out their school year. Every one of these kids goes to local schools in the area. We are going to make this worse. The protective factors for kids who are housing insecure: community, friends, people who they're familiar with. If you look around, all the kids here are communally raised. Moms can leave and they have somebody who can take care of their kids. We are trying to the government, not us, the government and the police who have come here multiple times are trying to strip that support system away from these kids. I ask that the mayor, the governor, whoever has the capacity to stop this eviction, step in. If not for the people who are here, for the children who are our future.
Woo! I just want to. These kids are okay.
They're okay. I came by and I did an evaluation. The only thing that I've found is that, okay, the dust, like all of us, some of them have allergies, some of them have runny noses, but that's because of the cold and the dust. And you know what the answer to that is? Housing.
Thank you.
Sure. Thank you.
Well said.
Right. Thank you. Thank you for coming.
Can I ask what outlet you're with?
Me? Yeah. Channel 4.
Thank you guys for coming.
You can get it on our.
For another journalist. Before their own journalist, I'm asking.